Is that American 11 trying to call?
Buddy, we have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're heading to the airport.
And who's trying to call me here? American 11, are you trying to call?
Nobody move. Everything will be okay. If you try to make any move, you'll injure yourself and the airplane. Just stay quiet.
That's good. I thought you were referencing for the move.
Nobody move, please. We're going back to the airport. Don't try to make any stupid moves.
This lesson is designed to help the speaker produce a convincing Arabic accent using key vowel and consonant changes when applied to a text.
We have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're heading to the airport. Nobody move. Everything will be okay. If you try to make any move, you'll injure yourself and the airplane. Just stay quiet.
That's good.
Every simple step, crossing borders or going on a plane or on a ship, will become more complicated. It's a time to launch a operational, concrete war against terror, even if it takes certain pains from the routine activities of our normal society. Bin Laden sits in Afghanistan. Every simple step, crossing borders or going on a plane or on a ship, will become more complicated. It's a time to launch a operational, concrete war against terror, even if it takes certain pains from the routine activities of our normal society. This is the time to deploy a globally concerted effort led by the United States, the UK, Europe, and Russia against all sources of terror. Consistently, along 6 or 10 years, in Iran, Iraq, Libya, North Korea, this is the only way. Without this clarity of purpose, there will be no world order, no world order possible here.
There is a chance for the President of the United States to use this disaster to carry out what his father, a phrase his father used, I think, only once, and hasn't been used since, and that is a new world order.
There was a great resolution passed at the United Nations last night that might bring about a new order in the world that would be better for all of us.
Preparing for this kind of event for nearly a decade. We've had presidential directives. It's a project called Homeland Defense. It's a project
of purpose. There will be no world order, no world order possible here.
There is a chance for the President of the United States to use this disaster to carry out what his father, a phrase his father used, I think, only once, and hasn't been used since, and that is a new world order.
It was a total pretext. It's inexplicable. And there you go to Cheney, there you go to Bush, there you go to the Jewish NeoCons who wanted to remake the world,
That they somehow went to war on a pretext for the state of Israel.
Who said, quote, "We're benefiting from one thing, and that is the attack on the Twin Towers and Pentagon and the American struggle in Iraq." End quote.
Type of information that and methods of collections that you don't want to share with a local host country, systems that you use, contacts that you make, undercover operations that you penetrating other terrorist networks. Those types of information you don't share. with anybody.
To be launched, and I'd mentioned JINSA to you, the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs, the JINSA NeoCons, and you knew full well what that was because you responded by saying, did I hear what Woolsey, the former CIA director, had said recently on television? He's associated with JINSA, and has even said that he held up the Presbyterian wing of JINSA. Now, Colin Powell has also conveyed in the biographical book about him by Karen DeYoung of the Washington Post that the JINSA crowd was in control of the Pentagon, basically. And we know that from the clean break agenda that the Iraq War was based on.
A clean break was written by Richard Pearl, Douglas Feith, and David Wormser. All three of them had high-ranking positions in the government of Benjamin Netanyahu in 1996, and that paper was written for that administration in Israel. That paper called for three major objectives: cutting off peace talks with Yasser Arafat, it was 1996, keep in mind, launching military assaults on the occupied territories of Palestine, and those two things ended up happening. And the third objective was deposing Saddam Hussein. So, 2002, Richard Pearl, Douglas Feith, and David Wormser are now all high-ranking members of the Bush administration. Richard Pearl, head of the Defense Policy Board, which is an advisory group to the Pentagon. A third of its members had ties to companies that got billions of dollars of contracts when we decided to go to war. So again, conflict of interest.
Federal officials have begun a major investigation into whether someone or many people benefited financially from the evil done to the country last Tuesday. Not long before the attacks occurred, there were some financial transactions in the stock market that may indicate knowledge of the attack before it began. ABC's Antonio Mora is here. Whether they ever get to, if they ever get to the bottom of it, it will be astonishing.
Astonishing, no question, Peter. What many Wall Street analysts believe is that the terrorists made bets that a number of stocks would see their prices fall. They did so by buying what are called puts. If you bet right, the rewards can be huge. The risks are also huge, unless, of course, you know something bad is going to happen to the company you're betting against.
This could very well be insider trading at the worst, most horrific, most evil use you've ever seen in your entire life.
One example, United Airlines. The Thursday before the attack, more than 2,000 contracts betting that the stock would go down were purchased. 90 times more in one day than in 3 weeks. When the markets reopened, United stock dropped. The price of the contracts soared, and someone may have made a lot of money fast.
$180,000 turns into $2.4 million when that plane hits the World Trade Center.
It's almost the same story with American Airlines.
That's a five-fold increase in the value of what was a $337,000 trade on Monday.
All of a sudden becomes what?
$1.8 million.
And there's much more, including an extraordinarily high number of bets against Morgan Stanley and Marsh & McLennan, two of the World Trade Center's biggest tenants.
Could this be a coincidence? This would be one of the most extraordinary coincidences in the history of mankind if it was a coincidence.
It is absolutely unprecedented to see cases of insider trading covering the entire world, from Japan to the United States and North America to Europe.
ABC News has now learned that the Chicago Board of Options Exchange launched their investigation into the unusual trading last week. That may have given them enough time to stop anyone from profiting from death here in the U.S. It may also give investigators, Peter, a hot trail that might lead them to the terrorists.
Thanks very much. As a reminder of the complications here, the Secretary of the Treasury said today of this investigation, you've got to go through 10 veils before you get to the real source. Yeah. Thanks, Antonio.
Morgan Stanley are warned on the 6th and the 7th. Goldman Sachs are warned. Wanted a put option, didn't grab his money quick enough, so 2.5 million was sort of set aside for whomever. And the SEC said, we're going to give you the list of every person who made the put options because they knew it, they were in on it, and they made money on it. Murder in the first is when you plan it and you make a gain with that murder. That's place on September 10th. Now, the SEC promised, we will give you the name of every person who knew it was going to happen and made money on it. Well, they didn't. But there's a paper down there that I have from them. It's one of these papers here. You'll get it. And, oh, it's down here somewhere. But anyway, what they did say, the SEC did say, we can't give you, now this is how they backed out of it. They said, put options are not really insider trading. Of course they are. I'm quoting them. Not really insider trading, but are merely foreknowledge of events. Well, what the hell is foreknowledge of events? That's what you use for insider trading. So the SEC said that, okay? That's what it is. And so they said, okay, we're not giving you the names, but we will tell you this. All the put options came from Israel. Put options are not really insider trading. Of course they are. I'm quoting them. Not really insider trading, but are merely foreknowledge of events. Well, what the hell is foreknowledge of events? That's what you use for insider trading. So the SEC said that, okay? That's what it is. And so they said, okay, we're not giving you the names, but we will tell you this. All the put options came from Israel. Okay?
For beyond his own small group, bin Laden had no formal organization until the Americans invented one for him. In January 2001, a trial began in a Manhattan courtroom of 4 men accused of the embassy bombings in East Africa. But the Americans had also decided to prosecute bin Laden in his absence. But to do this under American law, the prosecutors needed evidence of a criminal organization, because as with the mafia, that would allow them to prosecute the head of the organization, even if he could not be linked directly to the crime. And the evidence for that organization was provided for them by an ex-associate of bin Laden's called Jamal al-Fadl.
During the investigation of the 1998 bombings, there is a walk-in source, Jamal al-Fadl, who's a Sudanese militant who was with bin Laden in the early 90s, who has been passed around a whole series of Middle Eastern secret services, none of whom want much to do with him, who ends up in America and is taken on by the American government effectively as a key prosecution witness and given a huge amount of American taxpayers' money at the same time. His account is used as raw material to build up a picture of Al-Qaeda. The picture that the FBI want to build up is one that will fit the existing laws that they will have to use to prosecute those responsible for the bombing. Now, those laws were drawn up to counteract organised crime, the mafia, drugs crime, crimes where people being a member of an organisation is extremely important. You have to have an organisation to get a prosecution. And you have al-Fadl and a number of other witnesses, a number of other sources who are happy to feed into this, who've got material that looked at in a certain way can be seen to show this organisation's existence. You put the two together and you get what is the first bin Laden myth, the first Al-Qaeda myth, and because it's one of the first, it's extremely influential.
The picture al-Fadl drew for the Americans of bin Laden was of an all-powerful figure at the head of a large terrorist network that had an organised hierarchy of control. He also said that bin Laden had given this network a name, Al-Qaeda. It was a dramatic and powerful picture of bin Laden, but it bore little relationship to the truth. The reality was that bin Laden and Ayman Zawahiri had become the focus of a loose association of disillusioned Islamist militants who were attracted by the new strategy. But there was no organisation. These were militants who mostly planned their own operations and looked to bin Laden for funding and assistance. he was not their commander. There is also no evidence that bin Laden used the term Al-Qaeda to refer to the name of a group until after September the 11th, when he realized that this was the term the Americans had given him.
The Taliban. Are you still of the view that Al-Qaeda is more of a myth than a reality? It's what you said last year. You also said you weren't even sure that they existed. Really?
Exactly, that's my view today as well.
That Al-Qaeda is a myth?
It is for me a myth. I have never had a report from any Afghan source on Al-Qaeda or what they were doing. We don't see them, we cannot visualize them. For us, they don't exist. I've never had a report from our intelligence, I've never had a report from our people, I've never come across them.
Did they exist in September the 11th? On September the 11th, 2001, was Al-Qaeda operating in Afghanistan?
I have come across the Taliban, I've come across other groups, I've come across the people called, calling themselves different names, different outfits of extremists and terrorists. We have reports about them. I don't know if Al-Qaeda existed and I don't know if they exist. For me, it's a myth. I have to feel tangible about it before I can say they are there. Well, reports say they are there, but I have no information.
Your allies in the US government,
se.
your allies in the US government, NATO forces on the ground in Afghanistan all said that they were there fighting Al-Qaeda fighters. When you say it's a myth, you've not seen any evidence, did they call you a conspiracy theorist? Some might say you sound like a conspiracy theorist.
Well, if saying that something does not exist does not mean a conspiracy. It's my judgment, it's my feeling. Maybe they are there, but I have not seen them and I have not had a report about them, any report that would indicate that Al-Qaeda is operating in Afghanistan. And I've also been in conversation with various American officials. The last one that I had was last year, in which they told me that there are perhaps not even more than 30 to 35 individuals. So if that's the entire strength of an organization, for me, that's a myth.
Yeah, well, the meeting was for my own newspaper, the London Independent, not for The Nation, though I did write a piece for The Nation. It was looking back on it, I suppose it was a prescient meeting, although at the time, of course, it was interesting enough. We knew that the Americans were fingering bin Laden as the man behind attacks on American troops in the Gulf. We knew that bin Laden was being accused of running an international network of World Terror Inc. And when I approached him, I think he thought I was going to ask him about World Terror Inc. But in fact, copy of the newspaper later on. And apparently,
is that American 11 trying to call? Buddy, we have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're heading to the airport. And who's trying to call me here? American 11, are you trying to call? Nobody move. Everything will be okay. If you try to make any move, you'll injure yourself and the airplane. Let's stay quiet.
That's good. I thought you were referencing for the move.
Nobody move, please. We're going back to the airport. Don't try to make any stupid moves.
This lesson is designed to help the speaker produce a convincing Arabic accent using key vowel and consonant changes when applied to a text.
We have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're heading to the airport. Nobody move. Everything will be okay. If you try to make any move, you'll injure yourself and the airplane. Let's stay quiet.
That's good.
Every simple step, crossing borders or going on a plane or on a ship, will become more complicated. It's a time to launch a operational, concrete war against terror, even if it takes certain pains from the routine activities of our normal society. Bin Laden sits in Afghanistan. Every simple step, crossing borders or going on a plane or on a ship, will become more complicated. It's a time to launch a operational, concrete war against terror, even if it takes certain pains from the routine activities of our normal society. This is the time to deploy a globally concerted effort led by the United States, the UK, Europe, and Russia against all sources of terror consistently along 6 or 10 years. Iran, Iraq, Libya, North Korea. This is the only way. Without this clarity of purpose, there will be no world order, no world order possible.
There is a chance for the President of the United States to use this disaster to carry out what his father, a phrase his father used, I think, only once.
One of the scenarios in Operation Northwoods was to take a regularly scheduled commercial airliner and take a similar type plane, paint the tail numbers up to resemble that of the commercial airliner, fly it by remote control out over the Caribbean, and by remote control blow it up after sending a tape recorded message saying, "Help, we're being attacked by Cuban MiGs." This was in 1962. And take a similar type plane, paint the tail numbers up to resemble that of the commercial airliner, fly it by remote control out over the Caribbean, and by remote control blow it up after sending a tape recorded message saying, "Help, we're being attacked by Cuban MiGs."
Not even close.
This was in
No
1962.
photo has ever shown a wing fairing from any photograph from any plane at any resolution showing the equivalent feature until, according to you, shows up for the first time on 9/11. No photograph shows a wing fairing can create its own reflection. Does it bulge enough to do anything special? And I don't believe you have the evidence. However, a new photograph in my next video shows a front view that shows the most extreme example yet of a bulge too big and too low to be a wing fairing.
Last thing I saw before the second attack was the silver underside of the plane before it went into the building.
It wasn't in the commercial airliner. No, that second one wasn't no commercial. No, the second one definitely didn't have any markings on it that I saw. No, I didn't see any. The second one, it didn't have, like no camouflage or anything. No emblems, no logos.
The second plane was an unmarked silver fuselage.
I'd say it was like a two-engine plane or something. But it didn't look like an airliner to me because it was black.
This one did it on purpose.
Okay.
Like a black plane. Yeah, we see it going around. He went. Yeah, we just saw it. A black plane. Yeah, we see it going around. He went.
Another plane. The plane wasn't no airline or anything. It was a twin-engine, big gray plane.
When you saw the second
engine, big gray plane.
When you saw the second one happen, what did it look like?
And it was a much smaller plane, but someone said it looked like a military plane, but I'm not sure. I don't know much about airplanes.
Mark, were you close enough to be able to see any markings on the airplane?
It definitely did not look like a commercial plane. I didn't see any windows on the sides.
No, it was a black plane. It looked like a fighter jet.
It looked like a fighter jet.
And it didn't look like a commercial jet.
It was a military plane.
Could be a drone aircraft. That's an aircraft that's guided electronically to its target without having a pilot.
The plane circle around and actually come on to the opposite side of the building and smash into the Trade Center. It was great, to be honest with you.
We watched the first explosion. As we were watching the buildings, I saw a black, very large airplane fly right into the second building. It came at it south, right in front of our eyes.
Explosion first and then it hit. Explosion first and then it hit.
I was out here. I heard two explosions.
Do it for real. Oh, blame it on the Muslims, naturally. Then I get my funding. Do it for real. Oh, blame it on the Muslims, naturally. Then I get my funding.
And at that point we were taken for another round of questioning, this time related to our allegedly being members of Mossad. The fact of the matter is, we are coming from a country that experiences terror daily. Our purpose was to document the event. Our purpose was to document the event.
It's on that plane. It's a big truck with a mural painted of an airplane diving into New York City and exploding. I don't know what's in the truck. The truck is in between 6th and 7th on King Street.
All right, 10-4, I'll send the issue in the bomb squad there for Westgate.
The board? With a mural painted airplane diving into New York, blowing up. 2 men got out of the truck, ran away from it. We got those 2 under. That's good.
Are you holding those 2 guys, Kate?
Them under. Let's get the music going here. Listen to that. Fucking beat the shit out of them. All right, get in.
All right, listen, you need any further on those 2 guys over there? You all right over there, Kay?
Yeah, both suspects under Kay. We have the suspect who drove in the van exploded. We have both of them under Kay. Let's get some help over here.
Now, I'm sending you ESU there. I just want to make sure you and your guys are all right over there, Kay. That's all.
What's the location, all right, Kay? Put them up. You know, we have both Neotrans driven that exploded. Is that correct?
What location? The location, Kay.
Oh my God. Oh shit. Everybody's just stopping to look at it. Listen to it.
Yeah, it's insane.
Listen to it.
Yeah, it's insane.
God. Oh shit. Everybody's just stopping to look at it. Listen to it.
Yeah, it's insane.
Everybody's just stopping to look at it. Listen to it.
Yeah, it's insane.
Stopping.
When? It's going down.
Oh my God. Oh shit. Everybody's just stopping to look at it. Listen to it.
Yeah, it's insane.
Everybody's just stopping to look at it. Listen to it.
Yeah, it's insane. Holy shit.
We didn't know what direction to run. The crowd immediately started running up Church Street from Lower Manhattan. At this point, it's anyone's goal where you think you can get safe. It was a full sprint for FBI officers, for NYPD, for fire, for press, for media, for victims who had come out of the tower, not knowing what this is happening. We ran 5-6 blocks, and the smoke at this point, this is where it's like out of the movie, because we turn around over our shoulders, and the smoke at this point is coming closer and closer to us, and we don't know what's in the smoke, where the smoke has come from, and we have no idea at this point that the top of one of the towers is no longer there. We're still under the impression that this was perhaps a subway, and that as we were running, the street below us was going to shake.
And then it hit.
Underground! I'm with you! Let's go! Underground!
Started running north on Church Street alongside police officers, FBI agents, emergency workers. We thought the ground below was about to explode.
Hi everyone. I don't know where to begin. My photographer Glenn Mayrose and I are safe. We're okay. Back at St. Vincent's. Let's just tell you what we went through. At the time that the first collapse occurred, we were 2 blocks away, as close as police were going to allow us to get. Talking to fellow police officers, FBI agents, etc., when all of a sudden we heard a rumble. We were just about underneath the World Trade Towers, and I think our first impression was that it was a subway. We thought it was a subway, and that if this was a terrorist attack.
It sounded like, I don't know where the subway is, but it sounded like a subway collision, a bomb.
That they had attacked, obviously, the World Trade Center up high, and that something was going to happen down low. It felt like an earthquake. We hear this rumbling beneath our feet. We have no idea what it is. First, someone says subway, and all of us put it together. We say the attack is now perhaps the subway underneath us.
Second time on the streets, thousands of people running up Church Street, which is what I'm looking out on, trying to get away. But the entire, at least as far as I can see, the top half of the building, at least half of it, I can't see below that, half of it just started with a gigantic rumble, folded in on itself.
Right before.
I remember.
Then I saw the desk shaking. And I saw things moving on the desk. Like that. Like that.
Like a small earthquake, and I was thrown backwards off my feet, like 5 foot back into my apartment. I was thrown.
We could hear a rumble, which was about 5 seconds long, preceding the actual collapse, and then a boom when each of those towers collapsed. And then one person described it as a strange sucking noise as the buildings did implode after that. Now, the streets of Lower Manhattan.
People started screaming that there was another plane coming. I didn't see the plane, but I turned around and the second building just exploded.
There was a third, what looked like a third plane. I thought there was a terrible noise. It sounded like a plane very low. Then there was the explosion. And again, like the lady said, an avalanche of smoke and debris came up the canyons, up the side streets.
You were on Broadway?
I was out by Broadway, and I guess Fulton. I had been backed up to Broadway. Started running, had some lady with me. We got covered, completely covered with the debris and smoke. We ducked into a vestibule. We waited. It was an outside vestibule. We waited. Couldn't wait no longer. Pulled my shirt up, grabbed the lady. We started going, turned the light on the camera, started going. We found the city bus. Some people behind me. We got in the bus. We closed the door. We waited. Got a little brighter out. That's when we decided it was time to make the move. I got out and started walking around.
Was it just complete darkness and chaos?
Total darkness. It was like being in
started with a gigantic rumble, folded in on itself, and
I remember a rumbling sound right before.
We were standing probably about 3 blocks away, advancing toward the scene to try and gather some photos and some videotape, and it felt like the entire ground shook. It felt like what it feels like to be in a earthquake. The ground was shaking, followed by plumes and plumes of overwhelming smoke and flying debris, ash and pieces of the building. As the ground was shaking.
Was there sound with this, Nina?
There's a tremendous.
Yeah. I am reasonably sure that it was not the impact of the planes alone that did this. I mean, I think that's. I don't think you need to be an engineer to hypothesize that something else compromised them. They sort of imploded.
We want to go back to Marcia Kramer, who's in the newsroom, for a further update. Marcia?
Well, we have a number of updates. Number one, CNN is now reporting that there was a third explosion at the World Trade Center, probably an explosion from the ground that caused World Trade Center 1 to collapse on top of itself. Again, there was a third explosion. It's unclear what caused it, whether it was a bomb or whether the first plane that crashed into the tower had somehow been booby-trapped with a bomb that was timed to explode later after the crash had occurred. But CNN is reporting that there was a third explosion that caused World Trade Center 1 to collapse within itself and then collapse on other surrounding buildings. But you know,
it would create violent vibration and create a loud boom within the building. So it was boom, 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 and that kept, as it got closer, it got louder and louder.
But then the explosion on the south World Trade happened, and I said, this is something we have to do, we have to back out. We backed out over here, and even then, that's when I was caught again in the second explosion.
Yeah, I went up to the elevator, the 24th floor. As soon as we get up there, the elevator get out. I got power, we lost power in the elevator. Thank God we kept one of the truck guys there, and he forced the door, and then we worked our way down the stairs. As we came down the stairs, we were just dragging people along with us, and then when we came outside, it just blew, the tower blew, and I found the mask on the floor as I was crawling.
Boom, down it started to come, and right up at the top, like we were invited to watch. Boom, 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 down it started to come, and up at the top, like we were invited to watch. Boom, 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 down it started to come.
Time.
Tell me what happened.
I was on the basement, which is a support floor for the maintenance company, and we hear like a big rumble, not like an impact, like a rumble, like something like moving furniture on a massive way, and all of a sudden we hear another rumble, and a guy comes running into our office, and all his skin was off his body.
The museum hired specialists to perform forensic testing and analysis of 2 large composites and several smaller pieces that had broken off. Consequently, the museum conducted additional research, analyzing the heat levels that had created the fused material. Scientists determined that, at heat levels in excess of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, the tests show that the heat levels were too hot to be anything but one device, a minimum residual radiation fusion weapon. You can't have unlimited heat levels and still believe the narrative. Not being alarmed at this point only means you don't understand the evidence and how it can only connect to controlled demolition using minimum residual radiation fusion weapon. Only one video file exists of the ground shaking. The only reason for this level of censorship is because the army, knows better, and they know what to hide from the public, i.e. validation of a minimum residual radiation fusion weapon. Only one photo of minimum residual radiation fusion bomb exists under NIST, the uncensored SIPA folder NIST Release 29.
One of the more unusual artifacts to emerge from the rubble is this rock-like object that has come to be known as the meteorite.
It's this fused element of steel, molten steel and concrete and all of these things all fused by the heat into one single element.
And almost like a chunk of lava from Kilauea or Iceland, where they're very sharp but breakable shards on the end.
This 8-ton steel I-beam is 6 inches thick. It was selected to be preserved for future generations.
for the near-perfect horseshoe-like bend formed during the collapse.
I found it hard to believe that it actually bent because of the size of it and how there's no cracks in the iron. It bent without almost a single crack in it. It takes thousands of degrees to bend steel like this.
Typically you'd have buckling and tearing on the tension side, but there's no buckling at all.
One of the more unusual artifacts to emerge from the rubble is this rock-like object that has come to be known as the meteorite.
It's this fused element of steel, molten steel and concrete and all of these things all fused by the heat into one single element.
And almost like a chunk of lava from Kilauea or Iceland, where they're very sharp but breakable shards on the end here.
And architects, engineers, people who work with steel, welders have just never seen the level of destruction and the level of deformation of this material in our lives.
But in the past few years, he's come to love these pieces of steel.
I know every single piece here. It looks like a sculpture. For me, how I see that, every piece coming be a sculpture for me. They have beautiful texture, they have beautiful colors.
Gat says that appreciation keeps him going as he works to save the richness of the wreckage for future generations. Alice Greenwald, the museum's director, says she has no idea how she'll exhibit the wreckage. She used to head the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington. She does have a vision for this new memorial.
This is about honoring memory, and this is about educating people about not just the dark day of 9/11, but the best of humanity that responded in reaction to the darkness.
Those involved in the restoration spend every day looking for the light in that darkness, like a lot of
Somebody blew up America. All thinking people oppose terrorism, both domestic and international. But one should not be used to cover the other. Somebody blew up America! They say it's some terrorist, some barbaric Arab in Afghanistan. It wasn't our American terrorists, it wasn't the Klan, or the skinheads, or the them that blows up nigger churches or reincarnates us on death row. It wasn't Trent Lott, or David Duke, or Giuliani, or Schindler. Helms retiring. It wasn't the gonorrhea in costume, the white sheet diseases that have murdered black people, terrorized reason and sanity, most of humanity, as they pleases. They say, who say? Who do the saying? Who is them paying? Who tell the lies? Who in disguise? Who had the slaves? Who got the bucks out the bucks? Who got fat from plantations? Who genocided Indians, tried to waste the black nation? Who live on Wall Street, the first plantation? Who cut your nuts off? Who raped your mom? Who lent your pa? Who got the tar? Who got the feathers? Who had the match? Who set the fires? Who killed and hired? Who say they God, and still be the devil? Who the biggest only? Who the most goodest? Who do Jesus resemble? Who created everything? Who the smartest? Who the greatest? Who the richest? Who say you ugly and they the good lookingest? Who define art? Who defined science? Who made the bombs? Who made the guns? Who bought the slaves? Who sold them? Who call you them names? Who say Dahmer wasn't insane? Who? Who stole Puerto Rico? Who stole the Indies, the Philippines, Manhattan, Australia, and the Hebrides? Who forced opium on the Chinese? Who owned them buildings? Who got the money? Who think you funny? Who lock you up? Who owned the papers? Who owned the slave ship? Who run the army? Who was the fake president? Who the ruler? Who the banker? Who the devil on the real side? Who got rich from Armenian genocide? Who the biggest terrorists? Who changed the Bible? Who killed the most people? Who do the most evil? Who don't worry about survival? Who have the colonies? Who stole the most land? Who rule the world? Who say they good but only do evil? Who the biggest executioner? Who? Who own the oil? Who want more oil? Who told you what you think that later you find out is a lie? Who found Bin Laden? Maybe they Satan. Who paid the CIA? Who knew the bomb was gonna blow? Who know where the terrorists learned to fly in Florida and San Diego? Who knew why 5 Israelis was filming the explosion and cracking their sides at the notion? Who need fossil fuel when the sun ain't going nowhere? Who make the credit cards? Who get the biggest tax cut? Who walked out of the conference against racism? Who killed Malcolm, Kennedy, and his brother? Who killed Dr. King? Who would want such a thing? Are they linked to the murder of Lincoln? Who invaded Grenada? Who made money from apartheid? Who keep the Irish a colony? Who overthrew Chile and Nicaragua later? Who killed David Sebeco, Chris Hani, the same ones who killed Biko, Cabral, Neruda, Allende, Che Guevara, Sandino? Who killed Kabila, the ones who wasted Lumumba, Manlane, Betty Shabazz, Princess Di, Ralph Featherstone, Little Bobby, locked up Mandela, Deruba, Geronimo, Asada, Mumia, Garvey, Dashiell Hammett, Althea Sutton? Who killed Huey Newton, Fred Hampton, Medgar Evers, Mikey Smith, Walter Rodney? Was it the ones who tried to poison Fidel? Who tried to keep the Vietnamese oppressed? Who put a price on Lenin's head? Who put the Jews in ovens? And who helped them do it? Who said America first and okayed the yellow stars? Who? Who killed Rosa Luxemburg, Liebknecht? Who murdered the Rosenbergs? And all the good people iced, tortured, assassinated, vanished? Who got rich from Algeria, Libya, Haiti, Iran, Iraq, Saudi, Kuwait, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Jordan, Palestine? Who cut off people's hands in the Congo? Who invented AIDS? Who put the germs in the Indians' blankets? Who thought up the Trail of Tears? Who blew up the Maine and started the Spanish-American War? Who got Sharon back in power? Who backed Batista, Hitler, Bilbo, Chiang Kai-shek? Who? Who decided affirmative action had to go? Reconstruction, the New Deal, the New Frontier, the Great Society? Who do Tom S. Clarence work for? Who do come out the colon's mouth? Who know what kind of skeezer is a Condoleezza? Who pay Connolly to be a wooden Negro? Who give genius awards to Homo locus subsidiary? Who overthrew Nkrumah, Bishop? Who poisoned Robeson? Who tried to put Du Bois in jail? Who framed Rap, Jamil Alameen? Who framed the Rosenbergs, Garvey, the Scottsboro Boys, the Hollywood 10? Who set the Reichstag fire? Who knew the World Trade Center was going to get bombed? Who told 4,000 Israeli workers at the Twin Towers to stay home that day? Why did Sharon stay away? Who? Explosion of owl, the newspapers say. Devil's face could be seen. Explosion of owl, the newspapers say the devil's face could be seen. Who? Who make money from war? Who make dough from fear and lies? Who want the world like it is? Who want the world to be ruled by imperialism and national oppression and terror, violence and hunger and poverty? Who is the ruler of hell? Who is the ruler of hell? Who is the most powerful? Who you know ever seen God? But everybody's seen the devil. Like an owl exploding in your life, in your brain, in yourself. Like an owl who know the devil all night, all day if you listen. Like an owl exploding in fire. Like an owl exploding in your life, in your brain, in yourself. Like an owl who know the devil all night, all day, if you listen. Like an owl exploding in fire. We hear the questions rise in terrible flame like the whistle of a crazy dog. Like the acid vomit of the fire of hell. Who and who and who? Woo!